Trust the Profits Breeders' Cup coverage is brought to you by PlayUp Racebook, the most horse player-friendly racebook in the industry. PlayUp Racebook is always your best bet.
Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your boy, Hombre Matthew Desantis, with me here today. We're going to discuss the full Breeders' Cup Saturday results. What happened? Is there any horses left after this day that are not retired? As we both saw, a lot of big names went into retirement. Not a lot of big surprises, but a couple, I think, that we're hoping that we're going to be back next year. But long story short, let's jump into some results, because I think we had a historic day in some ways, and just an overall great Breeders' Cup weekend, in my opinion. What do you think of the weekend in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, it was an amazing weekend, and it's just, like I said, great to see people out there on the track, but also got to see so many great performances, so many wonderful stories on Saturday. We're going to get to a couple of those later in this card, but kick things off in the filly and mare sprint, and this was won by the favorite, Goodnight Olive, Chad Brown's sprinter. This is a horse that, as it got closer to post time, I started warming up to a lot more, and I think this is a race. There's a couple that we'll talk about later, was affected by scratches. Hot Peppers scratched out of this race. She was going to be very early legitimate speed, and I think was going to likely press a really, really hot pace, and that's part of the reason I thought Obligatory, who's a deep closer, would have more of a shot. Once Hot Peppers scratched, Goodnight Olive just kind of fell into the perfect trip of being able to sit kind of pretty close to the lead, but not getting burned up by it, and then make her move, and very, very impressive to see.
Yeah. Also, Echo Zulu with an impressive run. I think a lot of people kind of forgot about Echo Zulu's greatness, because there had been kind of a lull since we saw the dominance that we know Echo Zulu's capable of. But a great race by Echo Zulu and Ricky Santana. Yeah. It was kind of the same as the first race, when just drawing the 13 or 14 hole out there. Yeah. It's a big disadvantage when you're pure speed. You got just a little bit further to travel up. You got to stay out of trouble. Ended up in the second or third lane. Not a terrible trip, but definitely not the perfection that we saw at Goodnight Olive. And Goodnight Olive was super impressive as well. So yeah, I agree. That was a great run by Irad and Goodnight Olive. Echo Zulu was impressive. It was a good overall race. No surprises. I think you're absolutely correct about Hot Peppers falling out. Changed that race though.
Yeah, and credit to Steve Asmussen, who had both Echo Zulu and Wicked Halo. Wicked Halo turned around on 2 weeks rest and ran a really big third. I thought, some people were questioning that strategy, and clearly paid off. And Echo Zulu, to your point, one of the things when you look at her PPs, you see a lot of ones, right? She likes to get out to the lead. She likes to go. The fact that she was able to rate and sit kind of mid-pack almost, and then make a run late, really showed a new dynamic and a new element in her game. So excited to see what she does on this sprint circuit now that she's going to one turns. It seems like that's what she's going to be doing for the rest of her career. So excited to see what that holds for her in the future. But yeah, great way to kick off the day on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, I definitely did not like where Echo Zulu was sitting about halfway through that race.
Yeah.
I thought she was in big trouble. For her to stay up there, and like you said, a different style than we're used to seeing out of her, especially against the likes of Goodnight Olive with that closing kick. But the Echo Zulu ran a great race. It was impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll head over to the turf sprint, and this is one which unleashed the first of many big upsets for the day, or at least heavy favorites that went down, and this was won by the biggest long shot of the whole weekend, Caravelle at 42-1. You and Colin were doing those live reactions. What was your live reaction to this one?
I think we were as surprised as anybody. I mean, it was a wild one. I was really pulling for Emirati Anna, because that horse was also about 40-1, 30-something to 1, something crazy. And I did have a win. No, I had her boxed in a trifecta. Did not have Caravelle. So I was pretty heavy on Golden Pal too. I didn't see that race out of Golden Pal happening, but obviously the break out of the gate with a little bit of controversy, it was over for him instantly. And after that, I thought it was pretty wide open anyway. I think after Golden Pal, there was a whole lot of, wide open thoughts from everywhere that if you were going to fade Golden Pal, I didn't hear very many, a consensus of people saying one horse or another. It was more like one of these 5. So
yeah, exactly. No, you're exactly right.
Caravel wasn't anybody's that I remember hearing.
No, but I will give a shout out to Jessica Paquette, who's the new track announcer at Parks, former Colonial Downs, Sam Houston. I saw her in the paddock area right before this race, and she said to me, I kind of like Caravel here. And to her credit, she actually put some money on Caravel to win. Like an idiot, I did not listen to Jess, and I did not put money on Caravel. I also liked Emirati Anna quite a bit. That was my value play of in this race. And you were getting tremendous odds on her, or on him, I should say. I always want to say her, but it is a boy. But you were getting tremendous odds on him. He was at 37-1 right before post time, and then just got plummeted and nailed down to 21-1. Still a very healthy exacta if anybody had it with Caravel and Emirati Anna. But yeah, Caravel, you just didn't see. I mean, but she ended up getting the right trip. She was the lone speed and was kind of uncontested, and that's usually a winning formula on the turf. So in these sprints, and her previous races against mixed company have not been that stellar. She dominates fillies and mares, but this was a huge effort from her, and another win for our guy Tyler Gaffleone too.
Yeah, my 2 big regrets for the weekend was going too hard on Golden Pal, going too hard on Jackie's Warrior, who we'll cover in a minute. But you just can't predict that something like that happened in the start there. And a horse like Golden Pal, it's over immediately if you break out of the gate like that. Unfortunate for Golden Pal and anybody who bet him, but they rushed him up. They tried to recover that race early, but it was too much. By the time you do that much work to catch the pack, it was over.
Absolutely. And now we go to the Dirt Mile, which was, maybe one of the best stories of the whole Breeders' Cup, and Cody's Wish.
For sure, yeah.
And this was a horse I admittedly faded. Then I watched NBC's special on Cody's Wish, and I felt like the biggest jerk in the world for fading this horse.
You are. If you did, you are.
But got the 2 turns, and got the right trip. So, and a great finish between Cody's Wish and Cyberknife.
Cyberknife was game.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Cyberknife. I did bet that exacta. I did hit this exacta here.
Oh, nice.
Slow Down Andy was the one who kind of turned my head a little bit there, because I think Gunite ran himself to death early, but Cody's Wish was the coming at the top of the stretch. I knew it looked like he was going to clear it, but Cyberknife put up a great fight. And then Slow Down Andy just, was on the Derby trail all year last year, had some for sure respectable races, but I didn't see that one coming against this competition. But hit the board for 3rd, which probably spoiled a lot of trifectas out there, or helped some. But I certainly didn't have him on the radar to be in the top 5 even.
Yeah, credit to Colin Sheehan. Colin was all over Slow Down Andy. That was his best. That was his big value play in this race. I kind of dismissed it. Slow Down Andy is a horse that, I always joke kind of runs like a drunken sailor. It's just all over the place. Just as a really immature running style. It just
got away with it early in the prep season against lesser competition. Yeah, he was stammering all over the track and still beating horses. You're like, man, if this horse can get straightened out. I can't remember what race it was.
It was the one at Los Alamitos where he was like 3/4 of the way to the grandstand. You're like, buddy, you got to get back to the rail. Come on. What are we doing?
I think my live commentary on him was drunk driving. That's what it was bad. But he was still fast, and you could see the potential in him. But again, with this competition, it was a good run. 17-1 he ended up going off at. Cyberknife and Cody's Wish, obviously elite competition. And I was feeling for you on your boy Simplification, because I know that was one of your heartstring horses. We all have some heartstring horses.
It is. I love Simplification. The early word is that he's going to be pointed to the Pegasus, which would be about a 2-month break, which is he needs it. I mean, he needs a little 2.5-month break. He needs a little time off, I think, more than anything else. Year. Yeah, it's been a very busy year for him. He just looked tired. It just didn't have the elite speed to keep up with the milers. So I do think kind of that 1.125 is probably his best distance. And we'll see. I mean, it gets been get him back down to Florida where he's comfortable, and maybe he's got a shot. But not a great effort there from him that day. But the one thing I was going to mention, this is another one. We sat 2 scratches in this race. Laurel River, which was a horse a lot of people liked, and then Informative also scratched. And what that did was it moved Cyberknife in from the number 9 hole down to the 7 hole, basically. Even though he was still number 9, he was coming from the 7 hole. Interestingly enough, at Keeneland, if you started 9 or further out in dirt route races, you had almost no chance at all. And
because of the short straight.
Exactly. But the odds went up considerably if you moved just right inside the 8 hole. And so I think, again, scratches impacted the outcome of this race, maybe not in terms of pace, but in terms of just post positions, because suddenly Cyberknife is getting moved down closer to the rail with those 2 scratches. So interesting to see, but congrats to Cody's Wish and congrats to the connections, obviously. Just an amazing.
Yeah, it was a cool story, like you said. Great race. Another one. It was just like every race had some kind of cool story going on, good storylines. It was just an awesome weekend. I looked forward to this weekend for like obviously several weeks leading up to it, and it lived up to the hype in every way, honestly. So can't say enough. And I heard some mixed reviews on how Keeneland held it. I got one thing to say about that. Keeneland's not a huge venue, and I know they had a lot of additional stands, temporary stands in place and all of that. That's a world-class event with, more people than a place like that is used to having. So, I mean, I know it's frustrating if you're waiting 20 minutes for a hot dog or whatever else, but I mean, that's a once in a every few years type event. So I don't know. I love Keeneland. I support them. And
what I'll say is, having been there, I had absolutely no problem getting a decent spot to watch the horses run at the track, even flight line at the very end, which we'll get to. Like I was very deep in that field, but I could still get a good view of the whole thing. The paddock area was very, very congested. That was probably the biggest area, but I didn't eat it. I didn't have time to eat. Who has time to eat when you're at the Breeders' Cup?
Isn't that kind of what you expect when you go to an event like the Breeders' Cup or the Kentucky Derby? Like I've dodged going to the Kentucky Derby for years now, just because in my opinion, maybe I'm an old man, but it's just the comfort of your own home, watching it and getting the views that you get from TV, and all of that is in some ways just as good, if not better. I mean, of course, the live experience is incredible to experience if you've never done it before. But
yeah,
I mean, it's the same thing. You got to kind of expect that it was going to be a madhouse and crazy, and that's part of the fun, really. If you're not in it for that, then stay home.
Exactly. And one of the things I was going nuts about was this filly and mare turf, actually, because Tuesday was one of my top plays, and I told people I just had a feeling In Italian was going to go down. But I will say this: In Italian, Jesus, that horse can run. That was so impressive. But Tuesday sets the Breeders' Cup record for the filly and mare turf in terms of the time record, and gets another win for Aidan O'Brien.
Yeah, I was heavy on In Italian in this race, and I'll be honest, I adjusted my bet probably in the last 30 minutes before post time here, and I'm going, I am not fading the Irish horses right now. I'm not fading Tuesday. I loved In Italian. I kept him in. I kept them in like, my trifecta box.
Yeah.
I didn't hit the trifecta, but I went heavy on Tuesday win place, and that was sweet. That was a big win. I think, it ended up being 4-1 odds.
Yeah.
Great race. Tuesday was awesome. Incredible. And it was just like, man, at this point, it was like, are the Irish going to lose this week? I mean, it was just awesome.
It was.
Never been more impressed.
Yeah, just a huge win. And one of the things I'll just say very quickly, one of the coolest experiences I had was I actually got to go inside the paddock on Friday for the juvenile fillies turf. And right there in front of me, I'm just kind of recording the horses coming around, taking some video. And all of a sudden, 2 guys are right in my way. And it's Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore. They're 6 inches from me, and they're talking about instructions for meditate. And
we got that footage, by the way.
I know we got the footage, and so I back up, get the footage, send it to you guys right away. But the cool part was, I turned the camera off, everything, and Aidan was kind of standing right next to me, and he goes off with meditate, and I just said, hey, good luck. And he turned around and said, oh, thanks so much. And I will just say, Aidan O'Brien did not lose since I told him that. So,
Profits,
3 for 3. So I'm the lucky charm for Aidan O'Brien. But no, that was a huge effort from Tuesday. And In Italian, she runs so fast up front, and I thought she would not be able to hold off these Euros as they came up. But other than Tuesday, nobody else got by her. And so much respect for her. Just a great run. Can't say enough about it.
I was hoping Nashua got up for third there to complete. I did have that was my try box, those three, Tuesday in Italian and Nashua. So to be that, I mean, just again, this was one of my better years for Breeders' Cup betting. Thanks to you in a lot of ways for your coverage on the turf stuff. A lot of good turf information and European information before the Breeders' Cup. I felt more educated on that stuff than ever before going into the weekend for turf, especially. And that would have been a chalky trifecta, but with the 4-1 on top, it still would have paid nice.
Absolutely.
And I never would have engaged so hard in the Euros. I had never had before, being kind of uneducated to the, just it's a lot harder to get the full histories on European horses in your traditional style PPs. You don't always get the full picture.
It is. And
like you said, the racing is just different. So you can't compare. It's not apples and apples. So you're looking at the PPs. It can be confusing. So there's a lot of eyeball test type stuff that you got to get educated on. And again, it's hard to, some of these horses, in some of the European races, like you said, there's no turns. Some of the shorter races, some of them they're turning right. Some of them is, soggy or grass because it rains year round.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And I think that's one of the things with Tuesday. And that was the argument I made when telling everybody that she was my top value play in this race. If you look, her last 2 times out were over soft ground. The time before that, she finished second to Alpinista, who won the ARC. And the time before that, she ran against the boys. So people who look at the last 4 and go, she didn't win anything, there's legitimate reasons why. Yeah. And you got a nice price on her at 4-1 up top. So
she was 8-1 going in morning line.
Yeah. Wish you could have gotten that, but
yeah.
But this is, you mentioned him earlier, and this was obviously the next race was Jackie's Warrior going down to Elite Power. Huge upset, crashed a lot of people's tickets, I'm sure, because Jackie felt like a pretty strong single in a lot of people's eyes in those pick sequences. But you mentioned you were on Jackie, so what were your thoughts when you were watching this one unfold?
I was pretty upset with myself because our guy, the formula, was heavy on Elite Power. He did a case against Jackie's Warrior video. We each kind of did a case against video for all the heavy chalk, and he made a point, Jackie's Warrior, and he pressed Elite Power was the one to do it, and he was dead nuts on, and I didn't listen because I mean, in these deep fields at the Breeders' Cup, you have to draw a line somewhere and say, okay, this is my single, or this is where I'm going hard.
Yeah.
The other couple spots I picked to go hard, I was right. This one I was not. I think you kind of saw Jackie's Warrior playing the back 9 of the career there.
Yeah.
Just hadn't been as great as he was last year. Awesome career. Just didn't have it. Just didn't fire. I was surprised to see CZ Rocket up there because I've watched a lot of CZ Rocket in the past year or so, and I was surprised that he hung up there like that. 31-1. I guess everybody else was too.
Yeah, Flavian gave him a great ride. I will say he looked really good in the paddock. What did CZ Rocket, and kind of came up that inside rail, and I thought ran well. But you never know how Peter Miller's horses travel, and so it's always a question outside of California. But yeah, Jackie was, again, being on the track for the day. One of the images that I think I'll always remember is just how crestfallen Steve Asmussen looked after that race. I mean, he was just devastated. He was on the track immediately, walking up to Jackie, and he just looked so sad, as if he was the only person in the universe, in a racetrack that had 50,000 people. And the first thing he did is he went up and he just gave him a big kiss on the nose and gave him a pat and, kind of talked to him a little bit. And then he talked to Joel. The horse came first, then Joel. But Joel,
priorities straight.
Yeah, Joel hopped off and just kind of shrugged his shoulders like they're, and Joel's right. I mean, I may kind of knock Joel for rides occasionally, but not a lot he could have done differently. I mean, just he didn't have it. And
this was another one where the pace was pressed real hard early too. I think Super Ocho, I believe that was.
Yeah, Super Ocho pressed it. Yep, Super Ocho pressed the pace. I still thought at 6 furlongs, Jackie should be able to handle that.
Yeah, I thought we were in good shape on that one. And good work by Irad again. Irad had a hell of a weekend. Elite Power got it done, 5.5-1. Congrats to the formula, who I know hit that one pretty well.
Absolutely.
Anybody else who listened to that, unlike me, need to listen to my partners a little more. I did listen to my partners all you guys really did chip in to make it a good weekend for me. So once again, appreciate that. Here's another one. Here's a chalk that I did fade, regrettably. Modern Games. Wow. Another Irish, another dominant performance. Billy Buick. In case you weren't a fan of European racing before this week or before the Breeders' Cup the past couple of years, I mean, the Buick and the Ryan Moores and these guys coming over from Europe are showing, making their presence felt in America like they have been for a few years, but more so this year than ever. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, Modern Games is so impressive, and Modern Games felt like a horse that a lot of people were talking about fading, myself included. I just thought the travel was going to get the best of him. He had run at Woodbine in that Woodbine mile, beat Ivar convincingly, then comes back and goes to the British Champions at Ascot, and then flies back over here to Keeneland. I mean, just a lot of travel on a horse in a very short period of time. But something, I shouldn't doubt Charlie Appleby, because Charlie Appleby knows what he's doing. And he just wins at these Breeders' Cups. I mean, it is surreal. He is still, after this weekend, he is winning at a 53% clip at the Breeders' Cup. So Modern Games, just one of his many superstars in the stable. What I will say is Cheryl Spate, hello. I mean, just running at 55-1 in second place. Clearly, this is a horse that likes Keeneland, because ran a huge race at Keeneland last year at that Maker's Mark Turf Mile.
Broke up the Kinross and Ivar that were second, third and fourth, rather.
Yeah.
I think those were a lot of people's second, third choices.
Yep.
Cheryl Spate at 55-1 piece. Not a lot of people showed it love. I heard a little chatter on Cheryl Spate before the race. Of course, didn't listen, but
I know our guy Barry Spears is a big fan of Cheryl Spate because he saw her win down at Tampa. I hope he got a piece of it too. But that was a big one for Cheryl Spate. But hey, at least some American horse showed up and broke up what would have been the Irish Exacta.
One of the better showings of the weekend, man.
Yeah,
for an American horse.
Exactly. But I think you also have to talk about, obviously, the disappointment here, domestic spending getting pulled up. It seemed that there was an injury, obviously. It seems like
I didn't even hear much on that.
Yeah, it's a pelvic injury. It does seem as if the horse will recover and be just fine. Certainly we hope that's going to continue to be the case, but our early reports were very positive for domestic spending in that regard, coming off that massive layoff, breaking from the far outside. But I will say Chad Brown was just consistently over the moon about how domestic spending was training. So, it seemed like the horse was ready to roll and just, hit himself in the gate, and then just, eventually got exacerbated. Flavian pulled the horse up there. And, but I think also a disappointing effort from a horse like Annapolis, who had been,
that's who I was on. Annapolis is where my money was at, and just never even
didn't really run an inch.
Never showed the face in the race there. So,
so we move on, to what I think was probably the best actual race on the track of the weekend, which was the Distaff. I mean, that was bonkers. That finish between Malathaat, Blue Stripe, and Clairiere. You were big on Malathaat.
Yeah, that was my biggest bet of the weekend. I went pretty hard on a win place, and I also had a Malathaat Clairiere Exacta for a lot. So I'm sitting there going at that wire with the three-way head bob action.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, I either just won like $3,000 or zero, and I have no idea which, because I wasn't sure on the Exacta or the Malathaat win.
Yeah.
It looked like Malathaat cleared on the outside with an awesome run down the outside. Was the best horse in that race, but barely. And that was definitely my thrill of the whole weekend, was because it was my biggest bets of the weekend.
Yeah.
And it came to fruition, and I talked a lot of trash on Nest not being, and I know you were kind of fading Nest too all week.
Too. Yeah.
And Malathaat was the superior horse. Blue Stripe, we talked about Blue Stripe quite a bit too, being in the mix more so than Nest. I mean, I think we talked about this top three right here being the ones to watch here. Blue Stripe was our outside looking in horse that could make some noise and almost got there, man. I agree. It was the best race of the day.
Yeah, I mean, just a thrilling head bob and just a thrilling finish. I mean, reminded me of that High Chaparral Dead Heat from from
Yep.
years ago. And yeah, it was just such an amazing race. And I mean, Clairiere, geez, I mean, just talk about being on the wrong end of like a three-way bob, and just I mean, this is a horse literally 2 inches, and she's the Breeders' Cup winner. And instead, she finishes third, and just absolutely incredible. Malathaat, of course, retires after this and is going out to become broodmare. So
brilliant career.
Yeah, absolutely
Another brilliant
career,
man.
But I will say, I faded Nest. Nest still ran a decent race in fourth.
Yeah,
I mean, she wasn't that far behind those top three. So
no, that's a great top three. And then Secret Oath ran decent. I mean,
Secret Oath was the surprise, I think, of this field. It ran much better than I think any of us thought. That was a huge improvement over what I saw at the Cotillion from Secret Oath, which looked like she had a little bit of burst back. And she is going to be coming back for her 4-year-old campaign. Right. They actually withdrew her from the auction market. So
and with this, with the amount of the who's who of horse racing, top American horses this year, the majority of them disappearing from the scene for next year. That opens the door for somebody like Secret Oath to get a lot of big wins for 2023 as a 4-year-old.
Absolutely.
So that's good news.
Yeah. And it's funny. We just had the really 2-year-long rivalry between Malathaat and Clairiere. Now we get a rivalry between Nest and Secret Oath, it looks like.
Yeah.
Coming up. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
For sure.
So we'll go to the BC Turf. And hey, I'm going to sound like a broken record. There was an Irish Exacta.
Yeah, and Rebels Romance, who was, if you would have went back a month ago, I think he was more of a heavier choice by a lot of people. And then it kind of faded because, again, with a field like this, I mean, everybody you talked to had opinions, and not a lot of them aligned because there was just so many great horses in this one. I liked Broom, and then I started leaning towards Warlike Goddess some and Mishriff. I never really was heavy a believer in Rebels Romance, probably just because I don't bet chalk in a field this big on turf ever. And I did not realize that it was going to be closer to like 6-1. Because what was the morning line on Rebels Romance? Like 3-1, right?
7-2, yeah. And
yeah.
I think that was the big takeaway, which is if you had told me at the beginning of the week I was going to get 6-1 on Rebels Romance, I would have told you to bet the horse. And
I had made up my mind, and then I didn't even pay attention to the fact that it had drifted all the way to 6-1. I may not have changed my mind anyway, because I rarely cancel bets and do all that over odds. But seeing that go up to 6-1 is like, wow. Because, there was no reason to believe that horse couldn't win it. I don't think anybody was shocked by it.
Right. Especially after the weekend, everybody had up to that point, where the Euros had just been dominating. And so you just go, well, geez, I'm getting a 6-1 on the horse that was the favorite. Stone Age, ran a big race at 12-1 at a decent price. And Warlike Goddess ran third. I thought Joel, didn't give the worst ride in the world. I still don't love that he keeps her so tucked up against the rail the whole way around. I mean, this is a horse that can run for days. I mean, just you don't have to save every inch of ground.
Yeah, there was a moment where I thought she had a good shot.
Yeah, and she broke through it. She went through a couple really...
just before the top of the stretch. She had a little burst, and I was like, okay, here she comes. And then Rebels Romance just Rebels Romance.
I don't think the thing is, and that's why I can't get upset with Joelle. It would not have made a difference in who won this race. Maybe she gets second to Stone Age if she gets a slightly different trip, but hard to argue at that point.
If you look down the right side of this screen here, you see the odds. There was no surprises in this. That was my takeaway from this race. I mean, those top going down to Broom at 7-1. Yeah, that was the best 6 horses going in here, and they finished that way. I mean, I know there was some talk on Gold Phoenix and Red Knight being some, the outside, if you want to get a price type horses. And I agreed with that. Yeah. But I mean, it pretty much went to form, and more so than this weekend. I felt like the whole weekend kind of made sense, which is rare for the Breeders' Cup. Outside of the Caravelle race. Yeah. You could make the argument that there was really no big surprises outside of Caravelle.
It was funny going back and looking at everything. You're absolutely right. I mean, there really wasn't, like, honestly, the next biggest surprise, I think, would have been Mischief Magic in the very first race. It was probably the next biggest odds.
And that was like 7-1.
Yeah.
And then, Forte was like 4-1, but that was not a surprise. I mean, everybody had Forte in the top 3 at least.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was wild. I hate to say that. That's probably why I had such a good weekend, because I usually I'm not the type to bet a 50 to 1 horse very often. So when things just make sense to what all of us talking heads talk about, I win money. And that, I had a great weekend money wise, and everything seemed to make sense more so than most Breeders' Cup years. Most Breeders' Cup years, like half the races are like, wow, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
And that's a good thing it's exciting to watch that happen, but
yeah,
it's also exciting to feel, like all the work we put in, we really were pretty much dead nuts on most of these races, which is a great feeling. A lot of work went into it.
Absolutely. And we finished things off with a horse that I think we all, even though I made that video against the case against Flightline, I can't say my heart was in it, because I might have been the most bullish on Flightline out of everyone. I've loved this horse for well over a year. And man, what a show. I think right before, in one of our preview videos, I just used the words, somebody asked, do you think Flightline can be beaten? And I said, no, I don't think so. If it's going to happen, I think it'll be, an outside, a deep closer that, if Life is Good, press the pace, which Life is Good ran great too. Oh, amazing.
I said it would be somebody like a Rich Strike or an Epicenter that would have to close in, and I didn't see it happening. I said I just wanted to see history, and we did, and that was excellent, man. Longest margin of victory ever in a classic.
Yeah,
could have been. I think this horse could have been off the charts on speed figures. The horse was geared down its entire career.
Yeah,
it never had to make it never had to run the stretch.
It never had to run through the wire, and Flavian never showed this horse the crop ever
in his career.
Never went to the whip once. The only thing he ever did was use the crop just to keep him on track, but he never used the whip once. And even with all that said, he was only 2/200ths of a second, I should say, off of breaking the track record from American Pharoah in 2015, and so. It's absolutely incredible. The pace that Life is Good and Flightline ran to was insane. I mean, there was a audible gasp at Keeneland when those fractions were being posted. And you saw people talking to each other and just going, oh my God, they're going this fast. And
I'm sure it puts a little bit of doubt in everybody's mind that's close to the horse. Like, is this too much? Is this finally going to be the test that, Flightline will have to give way and not do it? And then no, not at all.
He answered the bell and but all credit to Irad and Life is Good's connections, because they ran that horse the way they needed to run that horse. He ran his ass off, and just incredible.
It was impressive.
The only regret I have is that I don't get to see him run at 1 1/8, because I think that would have been fun to watch him run at 1 1/8, because I think that's the distance that Life is Good is best at, and that would have been
that's
maybe more of a challenge. But yeah, just greatness on display there, and of course, Flightline goes to sale and goes out to stud now, as does Life is Good. Of course, the really concerning part was the injury to Epicenter as well. All accounts seem like he's going to be recovered. He's obviously been put out to retire as well. But that does have an impact. You mentioned earlier who's going to be around next year. That older dirt division, that the faces are going to be pretty new now. I mean, we're not sure about Olympiad. We're not sure about Hot Rod Charlie. Rich Strike is going to be back. Epicenter's not. Happy Saver's done. So, that older dirt division, Zandon, a couple of horses. We mentioned Simplification, a couple of horses like that earlier. That's kind of going to be the face of that older dirt division. So kind of wide open, honestly.
It's unfortunate to lose some of the better ones here, but it's money, and you can't, if you're an investor or somebody who understands economics at all, you have to understand it. I mean, it's unfortunate that you made the comparison about minor league baseball. It's the same thing. You're not gonna put Mike Trout, if you're, a 20-year-old Mike Trout for the Angels playing AA, you're not going to want him out, riding motorcycles in traffic and, risk the future of the organization. And these horses are worth so much more money in the stud game. You can't blame anybody. It sucks. It's unfortunate, but it's just like all pro athletes now. The money is so big, so crazy that you can't even blame the ownership or anybody else.
Yeah, and I think Andy Serling made I thought a really wonderful point about this a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about the possibility of Flightline retiring after the race, and he brought up the point that the ownership group they're horse people. He goes, they're not going to take this money and run away. They're going to take this money and reinvest it in other horses. They're going to buy other yearlings. They're going to buy other horse. Like, they're going to use this money to continue to strengthen the sport. So I understand from a fan standpoint, it's frustrating, but this money, there is a kind of a life cycle to it. And, the sales are just a part of it. And now the siring and stud fees are a part. And now that money is going to get turned back around to purchase the yearlings and weanlings and foals and all that. So it's an ongoing process, and just unfortunately the nature of the business these days.
Yeah. I saw a funny tweet. Somebody tweeted out, all my friends are disappointed because Flightline won't be able to run in the Kentucky Derby next year. It's just like that's kind of the fan perspective. I think the biggest disappointment and the thing that sucks about it the most for the industry is that you don't get that rivalry buildup of a 2 or 3 year long rivalry,
right?
Or name recognition. Like if Flightline was to run for 2 more years, let's say,
sure,
I mean, that thing could be a national sensation. That horse could be something like that would get to the level of fame of like a Secretariat did and break through and be in the ESPN top 100 athletes, just that type of mainstream recognition. That's the real unfortunate part, because it's great for the sport, but financially it makes no sense. And like you said, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. And what are you going to do?
Well, just appreciate the time we had with Flightline, and appreciate, watching that performance and knowing that we saw something certainly generational. And now, the beauty is Flightline is now entered into those, barstool conversations of, greatest horses, and, people are going to argue and spend a lot of time debating it. And that's okay. That's great. Everybody's got their take on it. But my thought is it's great to just have another horse that enters that conversation, and to be able to have seen a horse that truly is generational in its talent.
And nerds like us are just as excited for a new crop every year. Anyway,
absolutely. So. Yeah. I mean, I'm already excited for
find that just
next year.
My favorite time of year is right now when we're talking juveniles and we're trying to decide off of 2 race lines who's the bigger genius, splitting hairs on those numbers. And then by March, April, we're talking hardcore derby scene and trying to figure out who's the best 3-year-old of the year, like Epicenter was this year.
Yep, absolutely.
Fun stuff, great times. Again, thanks for all the hard work, the coverage. We all worked a wild amount of hours on this Breeders' Cup this year, but man, it was worth it, especially being right on a lot of those races. That was a great feeling. And then, like you said, all the recognition, we're getting 1 million comments and hundreds of thousands of views in the past couple weeks, and means a lot. It's awesome.
Yep. Absolutely.
So we'll be back, man. So let's knock out the Breeders' Cup coverage. This is probably it for the Breeders' Cup. And then we'll start moving on to do, next year's prep season for the youngsters.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Any last thoughts on the Breeders' Cup?
Just a very memorable weekend, a lot of great performances, a lot of great stories. And like you, just to echo, thank you to all the viewers. Thank you to all the people who engaged with our content, shared it. We read all those comments. We so appreciate it. And just a big thank you from us. And we're going to keep turning out great stuff. We're going to keep, capping stuff that's taking place at Del Mar or Woodbine. And, we're going to be doing week by week stuff here. And like you said, already turned our sights to 2023 Kentucky Derby.
Yep. Thanks a lot, everybody. Peace out. Until next time.